you for joining us at Agent Rising Real Estate School for Unit 5, which is Forms of Real Estate Ownership. Okay. So as I said, that this is the chapter that gave me the most challenge because I could not figure out what they meant on a lot of things. I did not know. I didn't know what I didn't know. Okay. So we're going to do the same thing to maximize this unit. You're going to have your book open to the unit, as I think all you do. You don't have your recorder with you now, but when you're at home doing this, you're going to record through it, right? And you're going to have your on your computer, you're going to have the slideshow, you're going to have your book open, you're going to have your audio. And you're going to go through and you're going to check out the things that you have. And you're going to follow the time. Okay, don't worry about that. That's not for us. And then you're going to visit the forum on agentrising.com for any questions. Okay, I will check that forum every single day. If you have a question that can't wait till the end of the day, you are going to text me, right? If it's a substance or a content question. If it's anything else, text Marie, right? But the content would be my question. All right. Forms of real estate ownership. Although the forms of ownership available are controlled by state law, real estate may be held in one of three basic ways. They include ownership in severalty, which means one owner, co-ownership, which is more than one owner, or ownership by a trust, which is property held for the benefit of another. So that's your definition of a trust. Okay? Okay, our unit objectives in here are to define and explain the distinction between ownership and severalty and co-ownership, describe the various forms of co-ownership in real estate, describe the key elements of trust, partnerships, corporations, and LLCs, identify and describe the types of property ownership for common interest properties. Okay, so here are our terms. Common elements, community property, condominium, cooperative, co-ownership, corporation, general partnership, joint tenancy, limited liability company, limited partnership, partition, partnership, PIT, which is principal, interest, time, and we'll find out. And what? Travel, I know. Wouldn't it be nice? Time and what is it? Title. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Right of survivorship, separate property, severalty, tenancy by entirety, tenancy in common, timeshare, townhouse, and trust. So a lot of vocab there too. Has anyone read through their glossary yet in the back? Have you guys? You did, right? You too? You've done your glossaries? How long did it take you?
Most of.
A couple hours?
Yeah.
A couple good hours, right?
Yeah, it takes a little bit.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because there were like different factions in the last class, like competitive little groups, right? And one person said, "Oh, I read through my glossary last night, like while watching something or something." And someone looks at me and goes, "She did not." And I was like, "What?" So they're like, "It takes way longer than that. She did not read through it all." So anyways, it was pretty funny. Although I gotta tell you, they're all passing, so it's okay. Ownership and severalty. Okay, property is owned by one individual, corporation, or other entity. Okay, so it's whatever's seen legally as one. Co-ownership, and then ownership's by two or more individuals. All right, I gotta see how these slides break down. Okay, so ownership and severalty would be
One person.
what?
One person.
One person, yeah. And all right, let's go to co-ownership. Tenancy and so here are your options: tenancy in common, tenancy, joint tenancy, tenancy by the entirety, and community property. Okay, so tenancy in common is the most broadly used form of ownership. Okay, it's when two people or more purchase a property together, and the things that matter is there is no right of survivorship. So I think of tenancy in common like a pizza, okay, and each pie has its own thing. So like if one person were, so there's no right of survivorship. So if one person were to pass away, their slice of the pizza would go to their heirs, okay? And it can be equal, or it doesn't have to be equal shares of it, but it's specified shares of it, okay? So owned by one or more people, no right of survivorship. Okay? The second thing is tenancy, joint tenancy is owned by one or more people. However, they start their tenancy together. It has to start at the same time. And rather than that pizza where you could pull out your piece of your pie and do whatever you wanted with it, everybody owns the whole thing together. So it's more like a cake. I'm a foodie. I can remember things now that I've associated it with food, I'm fine. But so you take your eggs and you take your flour and you take your sugar, you mix them all together. And then if somebody wants to leave, you can't pull the eggs out. You know, you can't take, you know, the sugar out. So, so if somebody passes away, it goes to the other owners. Okay, so it's called a right of survivorship. So part of my problem in understanding that was, what do they mean by right of survivorship and what do they mean by no right of survivorship? So what it means is that the other, in this particular case, the right of survivorship means it goes to the people automatically who you also own that with. Okay, that's when you are joint tenants. Okay, so the two big differences between tenants in common and joint tenants. Tenants in common, one person sells theirs, another person comes in, one person dies, it goes to their heirs. It's really not that big of a deal, right? Joint tenancy, you join it together, it's formed together, okay? Everybody owns the whole piece of cake, okay? If someone dies, okay, the right of survivorship, it goes to someone else. If somebody wants to, in a joint tenancy, leave and sell theirs, they can do that according to the rights of, or whatever the terms are with everybody else. That person that comes in as a joint, comes in as a tenant in common, okay, because they didn't all start together. And there's no, you know, there's no probate. When the person dies, there's no probate after, which leads me to one of the things that people thought when they were doing joint tenants. You know, so we're all trying to figure out what we're going to do with our aging parents' homes, you know, and to protect it and protect us and all that kind of thing. And someone had the thought, well, let's do joint tenancy, where if the son owns the home with the mother, and they do joint tenancy and they join it together, and the mother passes away, then what happens is then it would automatically go to the son. And doesn't that work well? And then there's no estate, there's no probate, there's no blah, 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 you know, so it's nice and easy. So that piece of it made sense. However, let's say the son goes and gets in trouble, gets in a car accident, has all sorts of liability, someone's going after his house, the house that he owns with his mother. Okay, then his mother's part of the home is vulnerable. So for those reasons, it's not a good idea. So anyway, I just wanted to share that. Those two things were so hard for me to understand. Okay, who wants to read to me about tenancy by entirety?
That's a husband and wife, isn't it? That's a husband and wife.
Yes, okay, so tenants by entirety would be married couples. Okay, married couples, right? So it's no longer husband and wife, according to the new federal law. No, it is.
On the top of
It's-
72, it doesn't say stock of ownership by married couple.
Yeah, okay. So husband and wife are considered, except for however unless it's spelled out differently, they own it as one, okay? There's a right of survivorship. So again, unless it's spelled out differently, that right of survivorship means that if one of them passes away, it goes to the other person, okay? And it's also seen, you know, almost as one, you know, as one person, even though they're married. And then community property. Who wants to read to me about community property? Tim, will you?
Sure.
Thank you.
Community property laws.
First, I just want to say thank you, Tim, because I asked everybody, and all you guys are like this. Tim did like one little half eye up, and I'm like, ha! Eye contact established.
He
He's
won't
doing
anymore.
it. Go ahead. Thank you.
Community property laws are based on the idea that spouses, rather than merging into one entity, are equal partners in the marriage. Under community property laws, any property acquired during a marriage is considered to be attained by mutual effort. Today, 9 states uphold this concept, although community property laws varied widely among these states. All of them recognize two kinds of property: separate property and community property.
Okay, that's good. So what we just need to know on that is community property, you know, for those of you who have, considered divorce, you know, there's different times that they tell you when something's considered community property. And, what'd you say? What'd you say back there?
Sorry.
So, okay, I didn't hear anything. All right, so community property is when it becomes the couple's property. And there's different rules about who had property before you entered the marriage. You know, supposedly when you're married, unless there's something else stated, you both own whatever's purchased together, you know, and then so forth and so on, you know. Anyway,
So how's that different from
Yeah.
tenancy of the one above that we did?
tenancy by entirety?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's say you had a house before you got married, and your husband had a house before you got married. Okay, so you both did it as sole owners, okay, and you get married. And at what point in time does it become community property that you both own both houses? Okay, you probably don't go back and change the deed, but it's considered community property. Okay, that's the best way I can describe that. And people who are iffy in their marriages know all the years like to get out. Anyway. I might
What
go with
happens in a common law relationship, where
Different-
there's never an official marriage, but
it. Different states acknowledge common law, and I don't believe that Massachusetts acknowledges common law, and I don't believe Rhode Island does either. So, you know, so you have to be married. Now, I will tell you, and it was pretty funny. I did have to laugh. The tenancy by entirety, right? The married couples. You know, it says in all the definitions, husband and wife. And I had, you know, a female married couple buy a property, and so the lawyer, when he saw just the two names, put them as tenants in common, right? So we're at the closing table, and you know, one of the wives says, "No, we want tenancy by entirety." The lawyer's like deer in headlights for sure, you know. And I said, "Oh my gosh, you didn't get the blog on that one," you know. So anyway, he went back and he changed it, you know. What's that? I don't know. It probably doesn't say it in there.
No, we're going on to, we were just reading the next one.
Oh, okay. Which one's
The
that?
separate property, it's right under where we are.
Oh, is it? Do I not have it?
I don't know, no, you haven't said anything about it yet.
Okay, read it for me because it's probably not in here. Please.
Separate property generally is real or personal property that was owned solely by either spouse before the marriage, acquired by gift or inheritance by one spouse during the marriage, or purchased with separate funds during the marriage. Any income earned from the spouse's separate property remains part of that spouse's separate property. Separate property can be mortgaged or conveyed by the owning spouse without the signature of the non-owning spouse. It's almost like they can sell it, but you only have a problem if you're gonna get divorced. Like, that's the way I'm reading it.
Yeah. Honestly, I think for our purposes, you just need to know what community property is. You know, and I'm gonna guess that probably some of that stuff has already been changed and amended as things have changed a little bit. So for our purposes, community property is property that's, you know, property that is in the marriage that the couples did together. You know, the stuff you brought in, I think, is considered separate until a certain time. I mean, by our laws, it's until a certain time. Okay, condominiums, cooperatives, and timeshares. We talked about this a little bit in one of the other chapters. Condominium ownership is you own the unit that's within your walls, okay? So, you know, if it's one of the condominiums that's like a single family or a single, like a freestanding on its own, it's kind of easier to understand what it is that you have ownership to, okay? Unit ownership for in a condominium that's kind of like an apartment type building that you have the condo in, you basically own what they say is what's within the walls. You know, and I think that there's a drawing in there that has like, you know, like a lightning bolt into the middle of the wall, you know. And you also own, according to, all right, so you have your unit deed, which is your piece of what you have. And then you have your master deed, which is the share of what everybody owns, you know, which is what the whole unit is. You own, on common elements, your percentage of your unit to the whole. So, you know, if it's, let's just say it's a condominium with 10, and everyone has the exact same size condominium, you know, they would divide that by, you know, 10, and you would own 1/10 of it. Okay, so that would be all of the common things that you have. Common things can be hallways, the gym that you go to, that they have on the site, or, you know, any of the open space areas that they have for you. Those would be things that you do it. Most of the time, the units are a little, like when you go to sell, and you see like different people have different condo fees. A lot of times those condo fees are determined by the unit ownership that you have. So that's all spelled out. And I think we have a whole entire chapter on condominiums, so we'll talk about that more. Right of first refusal, what that has to do with is, a lot of times the condo associations would have the right of first refusal when you wanted to sell. They wanted to buy it or what. And then HOA, the fees that are the homeowners association, so that would be what the homeowners cover. A lot of times, you know, just as a general rule, in a condominium is that the developers, you know, run the HOA as they're developing it, and then once a certain portion of ownership goes to the owners, they form their own HOA. Okay. Cooperative ownership, again, we talked about this a little bit. A corporation holds title to the building or the facility. And then there's corporation bylaws, and they sell shares of stock. So we don't have a lot of co-ops around here. But the co-op story that I liken it to is the one told of, I think Donald Trump owned it, a building, and he didn't like celebrities in it, so he would not let Madonna have a co-op in one of his buildings. And so it's because this is the one time that you can discriminate when it's a co-op, because they don't own it. They own shares in the corporation. Okay, some of the iffy things on this are, number one, you don't own any real estate. The second thing is that if the corporation doesn't pay their taxes, or the corporation is not financially viable, then you suffer. Okay, so you're at risk. Excuse me, and then timeshare ownership is normally you own the property for a specific period of time with others. It's a joint ownership. Okay, so you own a timeshare estate and a timeshare use. So you normally get to use it for a certain period of time, you know, or whatever, according to your agreement. All right, so beyond this unit, you're going to read your key points. You're going to read the quizzes and answers. How you right or wrong, why. The same things that we talked about. Let's do a couple questions. First of all, any questions for me? All right, so the 4-unit, okay, so okay, I should have covered this. I might even put this back in. The 4 unities of possession, interest, time, and title are associated with which of the following?
Joint.
Nice job. Joint tenancy. So the principles of Pitt, okay, apply to joint tenancy. Possession, you join at the same time. Interest, you're like a cake, right? Time, it's at the, you join together, and then title, you want it together, okay? There is a right of survivorship on that. So you have a nice little graph in there, right, of dividing up like how things are, I think. That's a nice drawing. Okay, a trust is a legal arrangement in which a property is held for the benefit of a third party. A beneficiary, a trustor, a trustee, or an attorney in fact.
Trustee.
Okay, how many people think A?
A.
I think it might be A.
Yeah.
Okay,
Oh,
how many?
A.
What?
A.
A, okay. See, we're right. Ah, we're wrong, trustee. See, you gotta trust yourself. See, this is what happens. You go in there. All right, so it's trustee. Let's go back to the question. A trust is a legal arrangement in which a property is held for the benefit of a third party who is the trustee.
Or isn't the person getting it, it's the person holding it.
Right, exactly. A legal arrangement under which the title to real property is held to protect the interest of a beneficiary is?
A trust.
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 A.
Trust, excellent, nice job. Okay. The owner purchases an interest in a house in the beachfront. The owner is entitled to the right of possession only between July 10th and August 4th of each year. Which of the following is most likely the type of ownership?
B.
C.
I
Timeshare.
mean, C.
Timeshare. Nice. Let's do one more. Okay, a corporation is a legal entity recognized as an artificial person. Property owned solely by this corporation is owned in
C.
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 Severalty. Nice job. We didn't talk about that. Nice job. All right, perfect. So you guys, we are going to, I think the next one's a Massachusetts one that's right on the same topic, right?
Yep.
Do you have in front of you, Paula, the calendar?
It is number 4.
Okay, so we're going to chapter 4 in the Massachusetts book. Thank you. Okay. So we didn't turn it off and turn it on. I'm not going to. Okay, so here we are. We'll let them figure it out later. We'll let them do the editing later, right? Chapter 4 in Massachusetts. So your red book. Do you like how Sonia matched the red with the red?
Yes.
So, and the yellow and the tan with the tan? Something else, huh? So these are all the little nuances that make her awesome. Okay. Okay, so this right here, we haven't gotten those first couple pages. We don't have to read through them. So we're going to jump right in. Estate in common. In Massachusetts, it is presumed that when a deed conveys land to 2 or more people, or to a husband and wife, except if it is a mortgage, a device, or a conveyance of trust, it is conveying ownership as an estate in common, okay, or tenancy in common, unless there is evidence that another form of ownership was intended. Tenants in common do not have the right of survivorship between owners and may sell or give away their ownership interest. Another distinction of tenants in common is that the ownership interest does not need to be equal. Upon the death of a tenant in common, the estate is probated in order to transfer ownership interest. Okay, so there's probate. And that was when I was telling my story before about that joint tenancy, is they were trying to avoid that probate. Okay?
So that's the standard. If you don't specify,
If
that's
you don't
what we get.
specify, this is what you get.
That's what you get.
And this was what happened in that law, that thing before, when the married couple went in there and he had a tenant in common already set for them. Okay, joint tenancy. There you go, our 4 main elements indicate joint tenancy are: the joint tenants own an undivided interest in the property as a whole, and each share is equal. All joint tenants own for exactly the same period of time, in this case, the tenant's lifetime. The joint tenants received and maintain their ownership under the same title, and all joint tenants enjoy the same rights until one of them dies. Under the right of survivorship, the death of one joint tenant automatically transfers the remainder of the property in equal parts to the survivors. When only one joint tenant is left alive, he receives the entire estate. Okay? So as I said before, if someone wanted to leave a joint tenancy, they take their slice out or whatever, however it's agreed, they sell it, the person who comes in as a tenant in common. Okay? Tenancy by entirety. The tenancy by entirety is created when the conveying deed expressly transfers the property to X and Y as tenants by entirety, and the conveyance is a married couple. Okay? It actually says in there, like, as a married couple, like right in there with it, you know, the words normally. Okay, partnership ownership. Partnership ownership results if partnership's funds are used in the purchase of a property by persons who are partners. Massachusetts has adopted the Uniform Partnership Act, under the terms of which a partner may purchase property with the partnership funds in his own individual name. The property does not have to be in the partnership's name. Okay, so the gist of that is that you could be in partnership with somebody, you could have the partnership funds, but it could then end up going into that person, like one person's name and not both of them, according to what the deed would say, even though it's a partnership. Do you guys have what does it say? Can someone give me an example on that one? Doesn't give you an example, huh? Okay, so I don't have an example of that. But if I get one, by Friday, I'll share it, okay? All right, here we go. Cooperatives, condominiums, and timeshares. To foster the development of a safe, decent, and affordable housing, the state encourages the establishment of multifamily housing cooperative associations. Following statutory requirements, a special kind of corporation is established in which unit residents own stock in the corporation and receive a proprietary lease. Does anyone know of any co-ops in Massachusetts? Doesn't look like we're doing a very good job, does it? You do?
No, well, no, I just know that there are a ton in New York City
Yeah,
Well,
my
that's
brother
all-
lived in New York City.
Yeah, in New
and
York.
Boston,
I haven't seen any. I mean, I don't know of any in Boston. There must be some.
where you have to be approved, you have to go in front of a board and be approved in order to,
Be a
They have a
shareholder.
protector, at least
to,
be a
to be able to rent the unit.
Okay, good. Condominiums, MGL, Chapter 183A. Condominium ownership is a real property interest combining mixed forms of ownership. Condominium means exercise dominion with others. Okay? Condominium conversion. Okay, so back several years ago, there was a huge initiative of converting apartments into condominiums. Okay? And the first time I went through this, I thought it was kind of a little radical and a little crazy. As I've heard more stories, it makes a little bit more sense to me now. The notice must contain the following 3 items. Okay, the owner has filed or intends to file a master deed converting the property to a condominium. The tenant shall be given a period of time to vacate based on the status of an elderly, low to moderate income, handicapped, or other. The tenant shall be given a chance to purchase the unit they occupied at terms equal to or better than the offer to the general public. Okay, so what happens? I don't know if it's going to go into it here. It's not, but there's a period of, I think, like 1 year that the people who are in there have in order to let them know if they're going to buy it or if they're going to move out. And you get an additional year if you are in a special situation that they just talked about. And there's I think a fee that they pay you in order to get you to move. So, you know, what happened was when they started doing these, they wanted to throw everybody out, and you know, a lot of like the subsidized housing and the rent controlled, and you know, it just was huge for. Did you happen to get what the heck's his name? Bob Wood? Or somebody Wood? Yeah. Okay, there's a Wood one. Yeah.
Okay.
Dave Wood.
What?
Wood. I don't know how he responded. I don't know what it's from. It's from this morning.
Okay.
These are my messages. I'm afraid that I'm not getting right back to people because in real estate you can't wait too long. You know, so I'm just asking her to let them know. I don't know what she's telling them, but that you know I'm getting back to them. So I could be on my like watch going, can't talk now. All right. So anyways, back to condominium. Condominium closing requirements is a 6D certificate. A 6D certificate tells the person who's buying it that I was just saying, is it
Monthly
the
fees.
association or is it the people who lived there before?
The monthly fees are paid up by the current owner.
Okay, so the monthly fees are paid up by the current owner. Now, does it also give the health of the condominium association?
That's a separate thing if you ask.
Okay. So, so that's the 6D certificate. So when you're buying it, so one of the challenges with condominiums is that when it's full and everybody's making money or paying their stuff, it's great because everybody shares the cost of everything and it's really works great. What happens when people stop paying their monthly dues or their monthly fees? And all of a sudden, you know, the roof that needs repair or the plowing that needs to be done or something and the money's gone. So what happens to the people who have been paying, you know? And also what happens if, you know, a certain percentage of them go into foreclosure like they did in, you know, Florida not too long ago. You know, so there's a lot of things that happen in condominium associations. And there's also some challenges that have to do with financing for condominium associations. But anyways, the 6D shows that the person who you're buying it from is paid up in their monthly dues, or their monthly fees, they're not dues. Okay, and there's also a master insurance policy on it, okay? So this is what you have for the condominium closing requirements. There's also, okay, it's right here. So condominium financing, you know, they have is it HUD that puts out the HUD, yeah, HUD approved homes, I guess it would be HUD, right? Who puts out HUD approved homes? Okay, so they put out the condominiums that are in a healthy, mortgageable association and condominium complex. And so they say condominium buyers are often surprised that banks will allow them to buy a house that costs more than a condominium. In calculating how much a buyer can afford, most lenders include the condo fees as a monthly expense. Therefore, when calculating how much of a buyer's monthly income is available to carry a mortgage, they include the condo fee. Okay. So, I just kind of talked to you a little bit about some of the challenges of the condominiums, okay? And one of the things is Massachusetts condominium super lien improvement, improves a condominium association's right to collect unpaid condo fees in the case of a foreclosure. So I talked about the foreclosures, the HOA fees not being paid. And what it does is it allows the condominium association to collect up to 6 months of overdue condo fees after taxes and municipal debts have been paid, but before any mortgage obligations. Okay, so when it comes time, when you have a closing, and they take that money that comes from the closing, there's an order in who gets paid. Okay, the first are taxes and municipal debts, so they're first, and then second normally is the mortgage company, right? Then third would be if you had a second mortgage. Okay, and then wherever else from there. What this does is this moves the condominium super lien up into that third position before the mortgages, okay? So that those fees would get paid off, so that there was a chance that you get some stability and viability in the condominiums. All right, so that was, and this is true even if the condominium association lien is recorded after the mortgage at Registry of Deeds. Okay, the other part of that is that when you have liens on a property, the taxes go first, the municipal things go next, and then the mortgage goes next, and then that next order on who would get the money would be whatever liens are recorded, and the order in which they got recorded, okay? So let's say you had, after you went through those things, you had a lien from the person who put the roof on that didn't get paid, the electrician that didn't get paid, somebody a credit card bill that's coming after you. So those ones go in the order of which they are recorded, okay? So this is saying that this gets bumped up, okay, even if it was recorded after, all right? So this is just trying to help the condominiums. Okay, timeshare ownership, we talked about that a little bit. Let's read through it. In a timeshare arrangement, the parcel is held by several owners in common. Each owner has the right to use the property for a certain period of time, which may be either fixed or variable. In Massachusetts, an ownership interest in the unit that I can't read from the side. That includes the possession during the potentially infinite number of separate periods is an estate in fee simple, and it includes other rights of common law fee ownership. Right? An interest in the unit that includes the right of possession during 5 or more separate time periods over limited years that is greater than 5, including the extension and renewal options, is a common law estate for years. Okay, so if you see estate for years on the test, what are you going to think of? Timeshare. Okay? Look at that. When we see quiz, we know what that means. Chapter's over. While you guys are looking in the book, before we get to the quiz, do you have any questions? Or is there anything in there that you want to talk about?
Well, just the other thing about timeshare is that if you have a timeshare in a Marriott, you can transfer locations and for your time.
Yes. There's a lot of time and also when you go. So when you go and where you go. So, it's funny, when I was just at a meeting last week in the Holiday Inn in Taunton, and they had my meeting on the side, and then they had a timeshare, like kind of get out of your timeshare thing on the right side. And I'm like, I want to go in there. I want to go pick up a timeshare. I want to go on a vacation.
Give them away.
Yeah, well, that was what I was figuring out, what their system is of giving them away or getting rid of them. Of course, not too many people would probably get rid of a Marriott one, Okay, quiz. Unless stated to the contrary in the deed, ownership of land by a married couple is assumed to be held by
B.
D.
Yeah, D.
Assumed, I think it's C.
unless a particular form of ownership is specified. A deed conveying ownership of 2 or more people in Massachusetts is held as tenancy in common. No right of survivorship, right? In tenancy in common. That's the biggest difference. Also, the other reason why you would hold a tenancy in common if you were married is why? You want to have your stuff go to your people. So a lot of second marriages would be a tenancy in common. Because you know, Joe has 3 kids over here and Mary has 2 kids over here, and they
Kinda
both
like
want
a
their stuff to
prenup.
go to, what?
It's kinda like a prenup.
It is, but it's just how they hold it, so that it doesn't automatically go to the other person, you know? A married couple holds their property as tenancy by entirety. When the husband dies, the wife will
D.
be
Be
sole
sole
owner.
owner.
D.
D.
Right, because under the tenants by entirety, both husband and wife own the entire property. The surviving spouse will be the sole owner. And tenancy by entirety, that word entirety means like one, okay? It doesn't mean 2 people sharing a tenancy. It means like 1 unit, okay? Which of the following forms of ownership represent a personal property interest?
D.
D, good job. A co-op owner purchases shares in a corporation that holds title to the building. In return for the stock in the corporation, the owner receives a proprietary lease granting occupancy of a specific unit. His interest is treated as personal property. One more question. In Massachusetts, a tenancy by the entirety what is it?
A.
A, except it shouldn't be husband and wife, it should be married couples, but then I know it's gonna be A. It is. Tenancy by entirety is to 2 married persons who cannot convey a petition of interest without destroying the tenancy. Okay,
So A.
it's A, it is A, yes. Okay, any questions? Look through the book, I know that this was a short, like, outline. Sometimes they're longer, sometimes they're shorter. Is there any questions? All right,